Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Constructor Criticism. I'm your host, Spencer, and I am joined by my co-host, a man who puts up with all of my crap, who I really missed while he was in Spain, Michael Hinderrocker.
Oh, thanks. I mean, I maybe it could have been back for last week, except that I sat on a runway in Madrid for 5 hours.
It was so funny because, I just assumed you weren't going to be back, and you were like, no, I'll be there. And then I text you in the morning, our morning, and I was like, hey, are you still going to be on tonight? And you were like, no, I'm not. That's unlikely.
So we flew from Bilbao to Madrid on the way back, and I assume just because there are more direct flights out of Madrid or whatever. And we land in Madrid, and the snow is coming down in these gigantic flakes, literally an inch in every direction. And I'm like, well, okay, our flight leaves in 40 minutes. Maybe we can just get out of here before it becomes a problem. And then it just starts basically blizzarding. But we didn't realize that because we were hurrying across the airport from the plane to the other plane because it was a really tight connection. So we're literally running to make the plane, made the plane, and then sat in the plane on the runway for 5 hours. It was great, let me tell you.
You know who will never delay your order, though, is our sponsors. You can check them out at mtgoasis.com. You can get 15% off of your first order by using the code
It's an aggressive statement.
MTG at checkout. And if they do delay your order, you can blame their employee, Michael Hinderrocker.
They will not make you sit on a runway for 5 hours. I can promise you that.
That's true. That's a definite fact. You can check out our other sponsor at oh my gosh, I almost messed up. At Fusion Gaming and the Mana Base, where you can see almost day 2 competitor of GP Toronto, Nikachu, and his awesome collecting company, Merfolk Deck. Mason didn't go to the GP, so we can't compare the two.
That means he had a worse record.
Exactly.
He did not, trailing Nikachu.
He did not have enough wins to make day 2 either. So
he was even further away than Nikachu.
Exactly. By a lot of wins, actually. But yeah, you can check out both those sponsors. If you're looking for amazing cards, we definitely recommend checking out Oasis Games. But if you're looking for Steel Product, check out Fusion Gaming and all that they have to offer. So you can support the podcast directly by going to patreon.com/ccmtg. We have our newest patron, which Michael is going to do a way better job of trying to say the name. I am terrible with names. Michael, what is...
All right. So...
name?
This is our second attempt at this podcast, so I'm a little... I don't know that I necessarily actually feel better about my pronunciation, but I can say it faster now. So I'm going to say Gwillem Humphreys.
Yeah. So first of all, Gwillem Humphreys, if that is your name, we just want to say thank you. It really means the world to us. You're a patron of $5 or more per month. It means you get access to the Constructive Critics Facebook group, which is a place where you can get deck lists early, where you can communicate with other people who are highly invested in improving at Magic, just like you are, right? If you're willing to play Michael and I money to improve at Magic, it probably means that you're really trying. So because I'm actively terrible and Michael's just a lowly silver pro.
Not wrong. But
Ouch!
You can also a lowly silver pro is kind of that's what 9 and 7 makes you feel like. But you can also inform us of how to pronounce your name, if that's incorrect.
Please do, because we have other patrons who we've gotten better at saying their names. Because one of the cool things about podcasting is there are people from everywhere, and people with way cooler names than Michael and I. Because Spencer and Michael, just let's be honest, they're not that interesting of names.
No, they're pretty boring. It's fine. I've come to terms. I've come to peace with that, but
yeah, who has an interesting name though is the newest co-host of our Pauper podcast, Common Knowledge. I don't think it's his real name. I think his real name is Sean, but you can check out Lobert, the YouTube phenom, and Brandon Clark as they dissect Pauper every week trying to help you improve at Magic the Gathering, as well as that show with me and lowly silver pro Danny Cathro, limited time only, where we talk about getting better at limited Magic. So you can check out those shows on the network as well as my YouTube content. You can check those out by going to Constructive Criticism on YouTube and searching for some of that stuff. Let's go on to our Patreon question. Michael, why don't you go ahead and read this for us?
All right. So this I thought was a good one.
By the way, how do people do this?
So you can post in the Constructive Critics Facebook group, but you can also just access. I think there's a list through the Patreon feed.
Yep.
So no matter what level of patron you are welcome to submit questions. And we try to answer as many of them as we can on the podcast, or just if you want to just ask a question, you just send it to us directly as well. This says, how often in a standard format do you switch up decks? Obviously, there's tuning a deck weekly for the metagame, but I mean, at what point do you decide to totally switch decks, especially when there isn't a clear best deck for the weekend?
Yeah, so kind of start this off. Michael and I are in a really interesting position for this question. And that's because I share a very large Magic Online collection with Quentin Pierce. So we basically can build any standard deck anytime we want. Michael shares with Alex Sittner and Matt Kling. So, we both basically have all the Magic Online cards we could ever want all the time. And then also we have an amazing sponsor in Oasis Games that just gives us access to their inventory for paper tournaments, for any paper tournaments that we go to. So for us, we switch decks, I would almost say to a fault very often. Maybe not all the time to a fault, but we basically can switch whenever we want. And that's not true for everybody. However, I think Michael and I would agree that switching decks as often as possible does help you increase your range.
Yeah, I think, and just like in general, I think having range is really valuable, because one of the things that is most, so like this question specifically asks about when there isn't a best deck, or when you're not sure what the best deck for the weekend is, but it's a really bad feeling when you think you know what the best deck is, and you also think you probably can't play it very well.
Yeah, Quentin talked about that last week on the podcast when he said the lesson he learned from his first Pro Tour is going into the Pro Tour, him, myself, and Casey very definitively knew that Mono Red was the best deck going into that Pro Tour, but Quentin didn't feel comfortable playing it going into that Pro Tour, and he felt really bad that he didn't have that kind of range. And this kind of just speaks to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately it's a little bit different at a Pro Tour in that it's just a small enough event that you can kind of get paid off for metagaming in some sort of way. But like, if you're going to a Grand Prix and you know what the best deck is, it feels so bad to just be like, well, I know this deck is better than what I'm going to play, but I don't really know how to play it. So I think expanding your range is like a really useful thing. And I just think in general, you learn more about the metagame as a whole when you switch decks a little bit. I think that not just trying to figure out what all the matchups look like for your deck, because a lot of the time, if you're really good with the deck, I think we've seen this a lot with Mardu Vehicles over the last year or two. Like, that deck has always been, I mean, it's had moments of dominance, but there have been a lot of times where it's been like sort of well positioned, but if you're great with it, it's probably good enough. But there are lots of times where, if you're not like Matt Severa, right? If you're not like a guy who's really, really great at Mardu Vehicles, but just good enough with it, I think you can hamstring yourself a little bit by sort of getting too deep on one deck.
Yeah.
Like, there's no sense in being Mardu guy. That doesn't do you any good.
I think so too. And, despite the fake news that Mason Clark will spread about me, like, if we go to the pre-bannings, right? Like, I tried Approach, I tried Mono Red, I tried Teamer, I tried Green Black Snake, I tried Sultai Snake, Teamer Pummeler, Green Red Pummeler, Sultai Pummeler. Like, I tried everything, and the reason to try everything is for honestly a couple of reasons. One, it gives you different insight than just when you're playing against the deck, and two, it just lets you think of more interactions. So, like, when you have that kind of range that Michael and I are talking about, first of all, it helps you in your deck building. Like, because you play with so many more cards, and you have to think about so many more cards when you're playing a deck, right? So, like, let's say that you're blue-black control guy in the standard, right? You have to only think about the cards that you're playing against that you care about, right? Like, those are the cards that are going to stick in your head. But when you're playing mono red, you have to think about different cards that you care about in your play patterns. So switching decks often does help you think of more cards when it comes to deck building and when it comes to card selection and sideboard cards and, selecting those kinds of things.
Yeah, my experience has also just been that in standard formats that aren't really dominated by one deck, sometimes things just change faster than you think. This is true in Modern a lot too. Like, there's a lot of value to having at least a couple of decks that you feel pretty comfortable with, just because things change, and like, you know, like so like Lantern Control won the Pro Tour, but I wouldn't want to play Lantern Control at the first event Bloodbraid Elf is legal in. Yeah. Right, like it's nice to just have like a little bit of range where you don't have necessarily be able to play everything, but being able to play like a couple of different decks pretty well and have a few sort of tertiary options that you can play if you think you need to is really, really valuable.
Michael, do you ever feel like you switch decks too much?
I mean, I think you can. I think that was a problem for me at some point where like I was more interested in just playing different things than in trying to play perfectly. And like it's really fun to play new decks. I mean, I think everyone like can see the appeal of that, right? It's just fun to play with new cards and see new interactions, right. But I think you can definitely switch decks too much, and I think in general, expecting your deck to be the silver bullet that takes you over the top just isn't realistic. Like most of the time, the reason the same players keep winning over and over and over again is because no matter what deck they choose to play, they're also playing it really, really well.
I mean, we're using Standard as an example, and if you just look at Brad Nelson's deck choices, you know, sure.
Yeah, he plays whatever.
Yeah, it's true that they are pretty often green decks, but, like, they're pretty different green decks, and sometimes they're not green. Like, sometimes he'll just pick up Mardu, or he'll pick up whatever. Like, and I think that people feel better about labeling themselves or others than is really necessary. Like, I don't know. Like, sure, I like green decks, but like I also feel really comfortable casting myself a Disallow or two. And I think that having that range where you're totally okay playing Fanatical Firebrand, Disallow, and Winding Constrictor is like a really good place to be in your Magic game.
Yeah, I mean, I think about this often because I feel like so many people have like favorite Magic cards. I don't think I really have a favorite Magic card. I don't have like a strong preference to what I play with.
Oh, I do. It's Lotus Cobra. So it doesn't really matter for this question, but Lotus Cobra is definitely my favorite Magic card.
Sure. Well, it's easier if you just choose bad cards as your favorite card, because then you're never tempted to play them.
Man.
I hope that stung a little. But I actually think it's better to decide that, like, Lotus Cobra is your favorite card than, like, you're only going to play Collected Company decks or something. Right? Like, I'm not really talking about saying you think Lotus Cobra is sweet and you wish you could play it. I'm talking about, like, if you're like, I'm only going to play decks with Collected Company.
Man, Michael, we obviously haven't known each other long enough, because I have, in fact, top-aided old school PTQs in Modern with Lotus Cobra in my deck.
Sure. I mean, you can, but, like, probably not. If you had a PTQ tomorrow, would you honestly sleeve up a Lotus Cobra? No. See, if you have to, sure. If you have to think about it that long,
so I am thinking about Lotus Cobra and Blood Red Elf right now. But like, if I test it and it's bad, I won't do it.
Right. I mean, I think that just generally, like, I like drafting with preference. I don't really like playing constructed with preference most of the time. Like, I think basically, if you can just get to the point where you're pretty comfortable with basically whatever you get handed, it gives you a lot more ability to metagame.
I agree with that. I just wanted to give Lotus Cobra a shout out, and you daggered.
Yeah. Oh,
well, let's move on to our always improving segment. Michael can always improve by learning the greatness of Lotus Cobra. But since you haven't done that yet, how did you improve Magic this week?
All right. So every time there's a Grand Prix coming up, I always just, for posterity's sake, check the price of the flights. Just because, like, I have rules for myself about if it's below a certain amount, I just have to book it.
Okay.
So I booked a plane ticket to Memphis at the end of the month, like a day after getting back from the Pro Tour. Okay. And it hit my price criteria, so I wasn't really planning on it, but
how is that an always improving moment?
Because I think that you can't do well if you don't give yourself the opportunity and just being willing to, like, play events. Yeah. You're just like, if it meets the criteria, I'm playing the event.
I've made this argument quite a few times, and like, so here's my current rule, because I actually agree with this, and I've kind of talked to my wife about this. Like, so I bought a new car, and I told my wife my wife let me get a new car for my birthday last year, and part of this new car thing is, like, she said you can take this to Grand Prix, and, like, you know, and part of this for me was like, okay, I'm going to go to every Grand Prix within 12 hours. Like, I will fill up my car no matter what. I'm not waiting for people to, like, tell me yes or no. I'm not BSing with this, right. But I will go to every Grand Prix within 12 hours. I don't care what it is. I don't care what format. I don't care like I am going to every Grand Prix within 12 hours. And I thought I was a crazy person for saying this. You just made me so proud.
No, because it's like I
that's
want
how you
to
get
be,
that's how you get silver and bronze. Like that's the way to do it.
Yes, you just have to play, and like, you know, I probably realistically need like a Grand Prix top 8 would be really helpful for getting gold, and you're not going to get them if you sit at home.
You're not.
Like you can't top 8 a Grand Prix you don't play, right? That's
yes. It sounds stupid. It's like that you miss every shot you don't take, but like when it comes to like Magic the Gathering events, like the variance is so high. Like we had a silver pro in Utah that I won't name names, but like he was not that good at Magic. Like he still plays in like every Grand Prix today, but he got silver just from like grinding and grinding and grinding and grinding and grinding. Like he played like every Grand Prix in a year. And I'm sorry, that's rude. He's very decent at Magic. It's not that he's not good. That's rude of me to say. But like the thing is like he gave himself so many opportunities. I think he might have 2 Grand Prix top 8s. Like very good enough. Like when you hit a certain level that this person hit, where they're clearly good enough to get onto the Pro Tour, very clearly. Like at that point, you have to be realistic with yourself, which is, okay, like what am I doing? Am I playing local events, or am I meeting this criteria that I've set? And I think that you've set an appropriate criteria, Michael, and I'm really glad that you're going to Memphis, because I mean you're what, 2 points short of silver?
Yeah, again? I mean, I'm going to hit silver before the next Pro Tour pretty easily. I'm not worried about that at all. But
which makes me sad because I don't get to play in the RPTQ with you. So,
well, maybe I don't really understand the rules for anything.
So if you play in the RPTQ, you can't use your silver invite for that Pro Tour.
Yeah, but I mean, I might just like. There are so many ifs before we even get to that point that I don't even know. I'll figure out the rules when it's time to figure them out. Until then, I'm just going to play.
Well, I for one am proud of you because I think that so for example, this week I was talking to the members of Constructor Criticism Worldwide, my testing team, and Seattle is just outside of my 12 hours for driving, and
it's 2 Grand Prix, so it only is like 6 hours.
That's not how that works.
That's definitely how that works.
I'm skipping it for a few reasons. One is because it lets me play the online RPTQ, so that I don't have to drive to Denver that weekend and take time off of work, which actually gives me more Grand Prix total than I would have gotten had I gone to Seattle.
Sure.
So
it's painful to skip the doubles just because the travel is the worst part by so much.
Right. And I mean, had I planned better, I probably could have gone to Seattle. But it was like, well, if I skip Seattle, I get to play the RPTQ on the day that I want to play it online.
Right, rather than at 5 a.m. or whatever the European time is.
Or I have to travel to Denver the weekend. It's either before or after another Grand Prix.
Sure. Yeah, I totally understand that. I mean,
So, I get exactly where you're coming from. So for me this week, though, my always improving moment is working with Chris. So we have – I might cry, so I'm really sorry. So we have a player on our team, Chris Hansen, who used to play Magic back in the day, qualified for his first Pro Tour back in the day before they gave plane tickets, and didn't get a go. And he's a patron of the show. He's on our testing team, and I think Chris said he played in 32 PPTQs before this weekend. And he had lost in the finals of multiples, and he just couldn't get over the hump. And the night before the event, he sent me a deck list that had 5-0'd online, and he was thinking that people would talk him off the ledge, basically, of playing this big red deck. And I messaged him back immediately, and I played Dire Fleet Daredevil, and I immediately said, Chris, this is literally the exact thing I was thinking about for Mono Red had I played it, was playing Dire Fleet Daredevil. Like, you should work on this. He came to the event. I walked up to him and I was like, dude, you had me thinking about Dire Fleet Daredevil all night. I made like 5 different deck lists. And he pulled out a deck list out of his pocket, handed it to me. He goes, what do you think of this? We went over it. He made some changes, and he didn't lose a single match. He snapped off the deck. And it was really a really cool feeling to work with a teammate on a goal of theirs that they've had for so long. And for me, the always improving moment is that I knew that Chris had a better deck than I did for that event, and I still didn't snap it off. Like, I knew all night. I was up all night thinking about that deck, and I need to be more comfortable making audibles. And the thing is before I was too comfortable making audibles, and I made bad audibles in the past. But I knew pretty confidently that the deck that Chris played was going to be a good deck that day.
Sure.
And I was too scared.
I'm happy for Chris because he top eights. I mean, not all of them, but like most of them.
Yeah.
He just
I think he has a similar top 8 percentage in local PvDQs that I do. And
yeah, he's like, I feel like just been pretty savagely unlucky. Like, you just can't actually run bad enough to lose in 15 30. Top 8s or whatever.
Like, it might be more than that, but like.
Yeah, I mean, I figure, probably took him a while to start making them, and then he started making them, and you're just not gonna lose.
Yeah.
Like,
so
I mean, even if you just win, if you're just 50-50, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you just assume you're like the average player in the top 8, and you're 50-50 in all those matches, like, you should at least win your 1 and 8, right?
Yeah.
And it's definitely more than 8.
So for me, I need to be. I think that what happens for me right now is that I only get so much time to play Magic as a dad, and I fell victim to the sunk cost fallacy, and it's something that I can do better at. So I'm gonna actively try, and when I just know, like the way I knew that Chris's deck was better, like I think I messaged my team like right away. I was like, I lost to Chris in the first round, but I just knew, like I knew I was gonna lose to him before I sat down. Like I need to be willing to make those kind of adjustments. And I think that especially like when you think about, the number of Grand Prix that I'm trying to play in or want to play in, like I need to be able to make those kind of decisions pretty comfortably. So.
Yeah, well, and I think that like it reinforces itself, right? When you like make those kind of decisions once or twice, it increases your range. It decreases how nervous you get about like, hey, I haven't really maybe played this quite enough. Is it still okay? Like, you don't always need to have played like hundreds of games with every deck you're going to play in an event. I
think that's true. Let's talk really quickly about our deck doctor. So every week on the show, we invite one of our patrons of $5 or more to submit a deck doctor to us. This week we have Green Red Monsters as our deck doctor, so it's a pretty popular deck. But they just want feedback on the way they've chosen to build this one, and I think this is really interesting. So let's go ahead and go over it, Michael.
Yeah. So let's see. We have 24 lands, 7 mountains, 7 forests, 2 the green pump desert, and the 8 red green lands, 4 cycle, 4 check lands. We have 4 Earthshaker Kenra, 4 Merfolk Branchwalker, 2 Resilient Kenra, a Ronus, 4 Jadelight Ranger, 2 Thrashing Brontodon, 4 Rekindling Phoenix, and 4 Glorybringer. 2 Magma Spray, 2 Shock, 4 Braid, 1 Struggle to Survive, and 2 Chandras in the main deck. A 25th land, the red-green tap land in the sideboard. 2 Chandra's Defeat, 2 Direfleet Daredevil, 2 Naturalize, 2 more Struggle to Survive, 2 Deathcourt Scavenger, 2 Sweltering Suns, and 2 Carnage Tyrants.
Yeah. So let's talk about what we love. So first of all, there's only one card that I'm a little questioning on for the main deck, but you could actually convince me. I actually really like this main deck.
So I think like this is an experiment that I've seen a little bit. The Kenras are really cool with explore creatures because you can like draw them in the late game by binning them, which is just really cute. And you can do the same.
Both Kenras.
All the Kenras. Yeah. So like giving yourself kind of more outs to make that happen for you is very cool.
Which was the idea by splashing black, but by doing it with these creatures, you actually don't have to splash black.
Right. So like you still get 6, but the mana is obviously going to be very good in this deck.
Yeah.
And that's a big pull. Like when you're playing decks that are trying to curve out, it's really awkward if you have a bunch of tap lands, and this deck has only 4.
Yeah.
And they cycle, so like,
So the one thing that I see in this is the struggle, and I do understand that these type of decks typically struggle with killing big creatures, and so you might want something like a struggle to survive in your deck. The thing is, for me, is that I'd rather just sideboard 2 struggles than clunk my deck up with the front end of this card. And I think that if you just switch that one card with like an Aethersphere Harvester or something that's a little bit like Wrathproof, you'll yield fine results too, especially if it's like a flying threat. Typically, you can put that down and continue to be the aggressor in the air during the turns where those big creatures are blocking you, and it will serve a similar purpose while not having to have a kind of a clunky card in your main.
Yeah, I mean, Struggle to Survive is like, it's kind of clunky, but it's not horrible. Like,
it's not.
It is just a castable removal spell.
Yeah. Like I said, I can see the argument to actually keep it in. That's the only thing. Like, other than that, I actually just love this main deck. Like, I might actually just jam this exact, 59 of this exact thing.
Yeah, it looks totally reasonable.
Yeah.
I like a lot of what goes on in the sideboard.
I do.
I really like the sideboard. Like, you have kind of the ability to go bigger and smaller in different like you can bring in some things that'll probably gain you life. You can bring in like some little sweepers, but you can also board in like Carnage Tyrants, Direfleet Daredevils, extra lands.
Yep.
So like,
it's
very cute.
Yeah,
it's very cute.
I do wonder, Michael, if on the Timber Gorge, do you like the Timber Gorge, or would you maybe try a Scavenger Grounds in that slot?
My guess is that if you're playing like Jadelight Ranger, Thrashing Brontodon, and Rekindling,
you can't afford it.
It has to be a color-producing land, but I don't know that it has to be a dual color-producing land. Yeah, I don't know that I like Timber Gorge, but I could see like another Hash-Up Oasis or something like.
Well, I think that with Sweltering Suns in your sideboard, depending on if you need to board up red sources to make that work for you, you could consider a mountain. I think you could consider that.
I'm not super sold on the Timber Gorge, like, exactly, but I also don't want to get too hung up on like, this is the land I'm like. I think playing a 25th land in your sideboard, whatever you choose.
I really like that. I think that you kind of need that for Carnage Tyrant, and a lot of the times you might be bordering Sweltering Suns when you want to make sure you're hitting your land drops too. So you could consider bringing that in those kind of matchups.
Well, and this deck has like Sheltered Thickets, so I'm not super worried about flooding out really hard with this deck when you have like Glorybringers plus the 6/6 drops essentially with the Kenras.
Yeah,
and like Ronus is a mana sink,
and you have all those Explore creatures too, right? So there's a lot of things that benefit you playing that land. So
yeah, overall, I would be curious. I'd be curious to play this one. I'm curious how like aggressively in the early game you actually just like bin Kenras.
Yeah, I would wonder too. I think probably a lot.
Like actually, basically every time.
Every time. Yeah. Yeah. So I think it's pretty clear, where we think this deck stands is our third thing. We kind of already talked about things we might consider changing. I like this. I think this is a very, very reasonable place to be for this deck.
Yeah, it looks like pretty good. I'm curious about the Chandras. I don't know that I am in love with them, but I just haven't been that happy with Chandra in general lately, so I might be wrong there.
Yeah. Let's move on to our next segment. I want to make an apology. When I'm writing this show, I forgot to do Card of the Week, and that is my bad. So I'm so sorry. We will make it up to you.
Oh, was this the one from last week?
Yeah, that's just my bad. You know what? Next week, we will do a sweet card. We'll make sure it's super sweet. So,
but probably not Jace the Mind Sculptor.
They can't hear Mason.
I recognize they can't hear Mason, but
okay.
I have to inform people that we probably can't give away a playset of Jace the Mind Sculptors.
No, we don't always give away a playset either.
Well, even one Jace the Mind Sculptor, from my experience today, is looking pretty outrageous.
Yeah, $160, baby.
Yeah, they're pricey.
Let's do this. So, we're going to go directly into our power rankings. This week we're using MTGO data, and this will be the training grounds also, because we're going to do the same thing we do for Deck of the Week every week for the top 5 decks on MTGO right now. Can you guys hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll start that when I'm done. It's all good, bud. No, don't stop. Awesome. So let's go and start with our number 5 deck. we do have Green Red Monsters as the number 5 deck. The list
No,
that we
that's
have
the
on
number 4 deck.
I'm so sorry. It is Blue Black Mid Range. Blue Black Mid Range comes in at number 5, and I'm honestly a little bit surprised by this, Michael. And I'll kind of go over why before we get into the deck list. I think that I've tried this deck a little bit because I was very interested in it, and I really felt like my mana was kind of horrendous.
Yeah, so it looks like the guy who got second in the Mox Quarterly was playing this deck with a Vraska in it, and then another Vraska in the sideboard, which I'm not sure if I like better or worse. But the mana is definitely not perfect, but I think like this deck gets to play a lot of really powerful cards. I think Vraska's Contempt is just really good right now.
Yes.
I think Liliana Death's Majesty is pretty good right now. It does like a nice little Vraska impersonation, but it's pretty sweet with Champion of Wits. It's pretty sweet with like Ravenous Chupacabra, Hostage Taker. A lot of these things have. Yeah, so like I think when you look at this deck, it can fall behind a little bit early, but when you start getting into the mid to late game, it has so many haymakers. Like Gifted Aetherborn is really good against mono red. You have all these cards that draw more cards, and then you have like a bunch of Scarab Gods, 4 Fatal Pushes, 4 Vraska's Contempts. Like you just have a lot of ways to catch up in games that are going long.
Kind of looking at this list that went 7 on the PTQ, it is a little bit different than what I was trying before, and I might consider giving this another whirl because kind of go over the list on the screen if you're watching. You have, and for those listening at home, you have 4 Gifted Aetherborn, 4 Glint Sleeve Siphoner, which has just made so many decks so far. 3 Kite Sail, 3 Looter, 3 Champion, 1 Gonti, 1 Hostage Taker, 2 Ravenous Chupacabra, 3 the Scarab God, 2 Liliana Death's Majesty, 4 Fatal Push, 4 Charter Course, 4 Vraska's Contempt, with 25 lands, including a Field of Ruin, a niftier Deadlands, and then just a really looks well groomed sideboard. I mean, outside of the Nezahal, I like all of this.
I mean, you just get you get Duresses and Negates against control, you get Moment of Cravings against aggro. You just have the ability to slide up and down a little bit.
Yes.
And I think that this is the kind of deck where I would imagine it is not easy to play. I can't imagine you're going to win very many games where you make a mistake. But
you can't afford to make a mistake, right? First of all, you have kind of a little bit of clunky mana, so making mistakes in those kind of situations just really punishes you further, right? Because it takes even longer to recover from those kind of mistakes. And and when you think about your removals, your removal suite and your interactive spells, right? If I play a Vraska's Contempt on the wrong thing, and I'm left with the Ravenous Chupacabra in my hand, I'm in trouble. Go ahead.
I think this deck is going to require a lot of sort of navigating tight spots with your life total in the mono red matchup. But after boarding, you have 4 Vraska's Contempts, you have the Gifted Aetherborns, and you're going to have Moment of Cravings in that matchup. And I think that if you just lay that all out, you have a lot of kind of good catch-up mechanisms, and Hostage Taker and Chupacabra both kind of can do that as well. And Scarab God in a deck like this, where you actually are likely to have a creature or 2 on board, just flips these games around so quickly. Basically, you untap with a Scarab God, and you're playing a deck with a bunch of removal spells and trading your Gifted Aetherborn for one of their guys at some point. They have basically 1 turn to kill you, or you're just gonna have life-linking 4/4s.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is one of when people talk about how they really like Scarab God against mono red, they're usually talking about these kind of interactions.
Yeah, because I mean, what's going to happen is you're going to end step, reanimate your Karizev, untap, reanimate your Earthshaker Kenra. Your guy can't 20 you, right? It just gets out of hand quickly.
So, Michael, when we're looking at this deck in particular, what do you think that the key cards are? Obviously Scarab God, but you actually mentioned Liliana, which is new tech for this deck, and I think that is a really big key card.
I think it's just a different kind of haymaker. I think when you look up and down this list, you can do some really cute things with Champion of Wits and Liliana, but what you can also do is just sort of like naturally throughout a game, your Ravenous Chupacabras are going to trade, your Gifted Aetherborns are going to trade. Liliana pluses to give you more Scarab God fodder. If that's like a thing in the matchup, you can reanimate Kitesail Freebooter that you like mill off your own Championowits or Scarab God to draw out counter spells against control decks. Like, I think this deck just has a lot of velocity, and Liliana is a really flexible card in this style of deck where you have creatures that do so many different things that it makes more sense. Like, we're not trying to reanimate anything super. Like, we're not trying to do like what there was that reanimator deck for a period of time that was playing like all these Gear Hulks and stuff.
I literally never beat that deck.
Yeah, I don't think I did either, but I still don't think it was good. So this deck is like a lot more mid-rangey than that.
Oh no,
but all of these creatures have abilities, right? Like if you reanimate a Ravenous Chupacabra, and then you untap and plus and like mill another Ravenous Chupacabra, and now your opponent's like, okay, I have to attack, I have to kill this Liliana now, or else you're gonna just like Chupacabra me again. It just gets out of hand.
I think that, you know, if we look at key matchups for this, you kind of already talked about one, right? Like in the form of you have to be able to manage your life total against mono red, and probably things like vehicles, right? One of the benefits that this deck has is that Fatal Push is never been better against vehicles. Like, kind of weird to say, but like they don't have the same threat diversity that they had before. So because of that, you know, your removal spells line up much better against vehicles than they typically do, and that does help decks like this. And you know, when you look at something like Gifted Aetherborn, it really holds the ground a lot better if you can cast it. And I think that outside of that, you're a pretty good Scarab God deck, and you're a pretty good. I mean, any deck that gets to profitably play for Glint Sleeve Siphoners, some Freelooters, and some Championowits is probably going to have an okay control matchup.
Yeah, so this deck is interesting to me because I played some of the like blue-black Gate deck a little bit, and this deck sort of looks like someone got frustrated with that deck and just cut all the bad cards and just decided they were going to play better Magic cards.
It looks like somebody got frustrated with that deck and saw Jabberwocky's old list and was like, well, I can just play all my good cards from his deck and my deck and just have a real deck.
Yeah, Chart a Course specifically has been always fantastic for me.
Yeah, I've tried that card in multiple. I mean, I secretly have a super crush on that card. So
yeah, like this deck is slow and kind of grindy, but when you actually can routinely, like, you have a lot of guys that are hard to block, right? It's pretty easy. But like a lot of time, your opponent won't want to kill your Championowits. Your Kitesail Freebooters can mostly attack. Your Siphoners can mostly attack. Your Aetherborns can mostly attack. So like in the matchups where Chart a Course is good, meaning the matchups that aren't mono red, because it's pretty fantastic in every other matchup, it's very, very hard for your opponent to stop you from getting to do that. And I think that basically, if you start playing against other mid-rangey decks with this kind of deck, it is a nightmare for them. You have creatures that draw extra cards, you have creatures that duress them, you have creatures that kill their creatures, you have a bunch of Scarab Gods, you have a bunch of ways to kill their Scarab Gods. Like, you don't want to get into like a haymaker battle against this deck because you literally cannot win. Yeah, that's not the kind of game this deck is going to lose.
Yeah. So, any tips and tricks? I mean, you kind of mentioned a little bit of it. You know, in the way that you kind of play your Lilianas is really going to be key to this, as well as I think understanding what the best thing to do with your Charter Courses are kind of the two things that I would think about a lot in starting.
Sometimes you might want to discard a card to Charter Course specifically. Like, you might be able to make your Liliana more impactful by like Charter Coursing away something that you actually want to reanimate with it. Other than that, I would mostly just say, like, you're just trying to not overuse your Vraska's Contempts, but this deck, it feels like it
gets to play 4 Vraska's Contempt rather than it has to play 4 Vraska's Contempt, which feels really good.
Having played a deck with 3 Vraska's Contempts most of last standard, if other people are playing creatures, you just like Vraska's Contempt is really hard to beat.
Yeah. Well, let's go on to our next deck. We have green-red monsters coming up next. The list on the screen is 4 Earthshaker, 4 Branchwalker, 2 Resilient Kenra, 4 Jadelight Ranger, 2 PNLR, 2 Thrashing Brontodon, 4 Rekindling Phoenix, 4 Glorybringer, 3 Magma Spray, 4 Braid, 2 Struggle to Survive, 25 lands in the main. We have 2 Chandra's Feet, 1 Magma Spray, 2 Deathgore Scavenger, 1 Sweltering Suns, 1 Brontodon, 2 Chandra, 1 Hour of Devastation, 3 Carnage Tyrant in the board.
But this list is really similar, right?
Yeah, really similar. Also, I've noticed that most green-red lists seem to be 7 or more cards off from each other. It seems like nobody has really decided how they want to build these decks. And I don't even know that it's flex slots. I think that people actually aren't sure on this one.
Yeah, I mean, I think just like we talked about this deck quite a bit. My guess is that your mono red matchup can be a little suspect. But that
I don't like that my 3 power 2 drops and my Earthshaker Kenra die. I mean, I just don't like that my cards die so easily to shock. Like, I have so many things that die to shock in the early game in this deck that if my opponent's playing 1 drops and I'm playing 2 drops, I typically want my 2 drops to be really beneficial in those matchups, right? Usually when we talk about how like you are the bigger aggro deck, so you're favored in aggro, their removal isn't impactful against you.
Yeah, and the problem, none of your creatures block very well outside of PNLR.
Exactly. And this deck really struggles against some of the things that mono red are doing, which isn't typically true of these type of decks. Now, I do think that this deck is way better against like mid-range decks, right? Like mid-range decks would struggle against you here. But as far as being the bigger aggro deck, I don't think this gets the benefit that those decks usually do. Basically outside of your 3-drop slot, right? Like Thrashing Brontodon, good against aggro. PNLR, good against aggro. Jadelight Ranger, serviceable against aggro if they're tapped out, right? And then Glorybringer is obviously great. But like the rest of the cards in your deck just aren't that impactful.
Yeah, I worry a little bit about mono red in game 1. It seems really hard to win on the draw. Like, really, really hard. I mean, not that anything has, like, a great mono-red on the draw matchup, but this deck, if you don't have a Magma Spray, it seems almost impossible.
Do you think that there's anything that people do maybe in their sideboards to try and hedge a little bit, or?
I mean, I think part of it is just, like, it depends on what you expect to play against, right? Like, I like this deck a lot better than some of these other decks against control decks, just because it seems like you have so much stuff that's hard to remove or is generating a lot of value. Like you're not weak as a deck to Fatal Push. Moment of Craving's pretty bad against you. So like a lot of these like blue-black lists are not playing, like no one's really playing a lot of Scavenger Grounds in their control decks. So like you're going to get value with your Kenras. And I would imagine just all the control matchups in general are like better for this than they are for mono red. Because it's just harder to just like metagame against this deck, kind of.
Yeah, I think that's typically true of these style of monster style decks. One thing that I would consider is actually just main decking Aethersphere Harvester. I know that the 3-drop slot is a little bit taxed in this deck, but I do think that if there's anything I've learned from playing Snake recently, it's that the mid-range decks also just struggle against vehicles. They're really hard to answer, and Aethersphere Harvester getting around Fatal Push has really put that card up, in my estimation, in this standard format.
Yeah, it's pretty decent. My biggest problem with playing Aethersphere Harvester in this deck is that it seems like the most up for debate slot in the main deck is probably the PNLR, and I don't really want to cut PNLR for my Aethersphere Harvester deck.
Well, this is like if I were to build this deck, and I didn't really want to get into how I would build it, but I would cut a Glorybringer, and probably a Struggle to Survive, or just both Struggle to Survive. So
yeah, I could see something like that. I mean, I think that Aethersphere Harvester is reasonable. I think in general, it's more of a fundamental problem against red. Like when you're just not playing any 1-drops and none of your 2-drops are really that good at blocking. Well, you're just gonna have trouble. It's just what you're signing up for. It's fine.
3 total cards that interact with them on turn 1 that you can even do anything on turn 1 with. So it's gonna be rough either way.
Well,
my point is,
and you need to draw Mountain too, right? Because like Shelter Thicket and Root Bound,
those Shelter Thicket and Root Bound Crowns aren't gonna do anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think just in general, this deck just doesn't block very well.
Yeah. Any other key matchups that people should think about? I think this deck is really, really good against Snake.
So I like this deck if people play Snake, and I like this deck if people heavily metagame their control decks against Mono Red specifically.
I like that too.
This deck takes really good advantage of the fact that Fumigate just isn't very good right now. If people start playing a lot of Fumigates, I mean, I know you have a lot of things to like reanimate, but I still think that this style of deck is kind of weak to Fumigate. But I don't think sweepers are really that good right now because they're not very good against Mono Red.
Yeah.
Between Hazoret and Chandra and Rekindling Phoenix. So I think that this, like, I could see a metagame where this could be one of the 2 or 3 best decks.
Sure.
I mean, obviously it's already doing well. It's you play a lot of really good cards.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you are considered, I don't know if that's true, but I think you're considered the best flyer deck in the format, right? Like, you just get to play Phoenix and Dragon, and it's like, okay, well, like, can you beat Phoenixes and Dragons? Because if you can't, you're probably going to lose.
Yeah, I mean, I think you start getting into a little bit of, like, why would I choose this over just a bigger red deck, right? If we're looking at 4 Rekindling Phoenix, 4 Glorybringer.
Yeah.
And I think that's maybe the question you have to ask yourself. If this appeals to you, like, do I think that I do a better job of what matchups am I more excited about? And
yeah,
not that that's like, obviously that's a thing you're asking pretty much all the time. Like, why am I playing this instead of something else? But I think that's the deck that like most closely mirrors some of the strengths of this deck. If I were looking at playing this deck, that deck just plays a lot of the same cards. So I would probably at least consider looking at something like that as well.
And we're talking about the big red deck, right?
Yeah. Like, you're probably not playing Hazarets, but like, if you're playing like 4 Glorybringer, 4 Rekindling Phoenix, that kind of stuff.
Mine does? I mean, I muted myself. Is that better now? Okay, stop on 3. 1, 2. Oh, Mason.
Okay.
Mason, will you send me a timestamp at like 57?
Okay, so moving on from monsters.
Let's talk about Green Black. Yeah, let's talk about Green Black Constrictor. And obviously, I know everything there is to know about this deck, according to Mason. However, I'm just not nearly the player of the amazing Moto Grinder that we have on the deck list in front of us. Who's this Reader Rabbit?
Yeah, we have him and Paul Rietzel slumming it out just outside the top 8.
Yeah, so they played 2 cards different, right? Or something?
Yeah, I think Rietzel played a Ripjaw Raptor and Reed played a Gonti.
No. Reed, sorry. So he played an extra Rishkar. Am I wrong?
No, it's just Ripjaw Raptor versus Gonti.
Okay. Yeah, okay, I see it now. Yeah, so these guys obviously played well. So let's talk really quick about what they did. So the list we have is 4 Walking Ballista, 4 Mournfolk Branchwalker, 1 Seeker Squire, 4 Winding Constrictor, 4 Jade Light Ranger, 2 Rishkar, 1 Gonti, 4 Verdurskir Hulk, 1 Vraska, 1 Blossoming Defense, 4 Fatal Push, 4 Vraska's Contempt, and then a Lifecraft Bestiary main. They have 25 lands, as well as 3 Duress, 3 Sun.
Their sideboards are a little different,
sure.
Right?
Well, I'm just going to read Reed's. 3 Deathcore Scavenger, 1 Golden Demise, 2 more Bestiary, 3 Brontodon, 1 Vital Force, and 2 Carnage Tyrant. So, here's the thing. I am not allowed to disagree with Reed Duke on a green-black deck. That's like against the rules of Magic. Michael, what do you think of this? What do you think of Lifecraft Bestiary in the main?
I mean, I think they're just hedging. Like, they're playing some one-ofs that are like, I mean, I would say like the Blossoming Defense, Vraska, Gonti, or Ripjaw Raptor or whatever are all kind of like flex slots.
Yep.
Right, like those can kind of be whatever. So my thought is that they're probably not playing more Blossoming Defenses just because drawing the second one is always horrible. Like, you're pretty happy to draw the first one most of the time, but you're basically always unhappy to draw the second. So I kind of agree with this as like a deck building philosophy. If you never want to draw the second one, don't play 2 and hope to draw 1. Just play 1.
Yeah, this is something that I've done for a little while that I really like in this list is I think that you do want a Blossoming Defense to keep your opponents honest. But like just playing that other one just gets so bad so quickly. I really agree and appreciate this deck building philosophy. And let's talk really quick about green black.
So they're doing the same thing with Vraska, right? Like sometimes the first one is good. Sometimes the first one you're dead when you cast it. But you never want to draw the second Vraska. There's no hand where you're like, oh, you know what this hand needs? It needs another 6-drop.
It's so funny. I've had one Vraska and one Blossoming Defense in like every green black X decks I posted for Snake this entire format. Like just one of both. I think that you want one of both. And there's a few reasons. I think that Vraska is in the matchups where Vraska is good. Drawing that one Vraska is usually game over. Like Tokens decks they can't kill you fast enough that when you play that Vraska, they can beat you. Like you play it, you minus it, you plus it, you minus it. The game's over.
Well, you minus it, and they have to have cast out or whatever now.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
So I think that the way they're building this deck is very streamlined, very good, and honestly, I think that we're maybe I was wrong. Because I really didn't like Branchwalker Jadelight Ranger. But the thing is I think that you can basically build the deck with random creatures once you decide that you're just on the Rishkar Verdus your whole plan.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also think that, like, this deck is just built to be a lot slower and less aggressive than...
Yeah.
This deck is taking advantage of the fact that sweepers aren't very good right now.
Yep.
I don't think this deck is remotely playable if people are playing a bunch of Fumigates in there.
Oh, it's definitely not.
But you're sort of saying that I don't think you can reasonably do that. So my goal is just to present a wide board, play around Settle if I can, and, we're just going to play guys. So every guy in this list is generating value in some kind of way. And, like, one of the things about Explorer is that even if the creature is killed immediately, you're still getting something out of it. But like when you play Foul Orchard over Aether Hub, you're kind of saying like, our mana's going to be pretty good. It's going to be slow, but like 4 Vraska's Contempts, a main deck Seeker's Squire is like, we're just trying to play slow, grindy games.
Yeah,
right?
This deck is saying like, listen, I'm going to get value out of my Explore creatures. I'm going to, like, Vraska's Contempt is something that, like, we are priced into in this format, so I'm going to make a deck that lets me play 4.
Yes, exactly. And I think that it looks reasonable. Like, I don't think that this deck is particularly exciting. I don't know that, like...
No, it's not.
I don't know that it's worth, like, investing a ton of time into, but there are metagames where this deck makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think that, like...
It's just like, it's really hard to look at this list and not be like, yeah, that looks fine.
Yeah, you look at this list and you see a green-black mid-range-ish good value creature deck. And there are going to be weekends where, like, the best EV play is to play a deck like this. Like, that's just going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, my guess is this deck mostly stomps mono-red, can beat control...
You basically just don't want to play against Approach.
You don't want to play against Approach. I doubt you really want to play against Godpharaoh's Gift with this kind of setup. Like,
well, it kind of depends on your sideboard. I think that this sideboard, you're kind of priced into certain things. So I personally have lost to. I'm going to knock on non-existent wood here. I've never lost to Godpharaoh's Gift with these decks, and the reason for that is because, first of all, those decks are so bad against Deathcourt Scavenger post board.
Yeah, I mean, Deathcourt Scavenger is really good, but with people playing Gate specifically, they have access to a lot more removal for those in the board games.
Do.
And
once they started playing Gate, the matchup did get a lot harder. What do you think of playing only one Vraska in the 75?
I mean, I'm kind of fine with it. Just mostly because I just think this deck doesn't really support 6-drops very well. Like, you can sometimes Rishkar one out, but you're only playing 25 lands. Like, it's mostly a turn 6 play, and there just aren't that many matchups where, like...
Where it matters.
Where I'm really excited. Like, Vraska's, like, it's just a pretty good Magic card, but it's not, like, really that good in this deck.
Sure.
Right? Like, we're just trying to play our 6th land and play a Vraska, and sometimes it's good enough, which is why you're playing one. I mean, it's really powerful, but...
Let's go on to another interesting deck. We have, coming in next, we have Grixis Energy, and I'm pretty sure I sent a Grixis control deck to Mason.
Oh, so we should actually... So if we want to look instead, the list that I am most interested in is by Panda Beast 24, and it was posted in this most recent batch. I'll just read it for posterity. But sure. This is Nathaniel Smith, who is a gold pro, and I generally think is just really good at Magic. So when I see his name pop up, I'm gonna look at it, and I like this. Hold on. So
we actually should talk about this for a second, because if we actually go by MTGO and what they're doing, there's only actually one Grixis actual energy deck on MTG Goldfish. All of the rest of them are actually sorry. There's only one Grixis energy deck. I just clicked through like 6 of them, and they're all actually Grixis control.
So some of them are Grixis control, but it's getting combined, and then they're splitting out Grixis energy sometimes as different decks.
Interesting.
It's MTG Goldfish being weird. Okay. I think realistically, I am more into. So they're like splitting the difference, right? There are some. If you go down and find.
Oh yeah, if I go to the lower ones though, like if I click lower, all of them are Grixis energy.
Right. So what happened was they like somehow. So this happens a lot with MTG Goldfish, where they're like software that is compiling what is what gets confused. But regardless, I really like this list from Nathaniel Smith. It's 4 Dusk Legion Zealot, 4 Glensleeve Siphoner, 4 Whirler Virtuoso, 2 Rekindling Phoenix, 2 Glorybringer, 3 Scarab God, 2 Chandra, 3 Fatal Push, 2 Magma Spray, and a Braid, 4 Harness Lightning, and 4 Vraska's Contempt, along with 25, pretty standard lands, including 7 cycling lands.
So what do you think, when it comes to Grixis Energy, what do you think the key cards are?
Okay, I love Dusk Legion Zealot because when I look at this deck, what I see is commitment to beating Mono Red and Hazoret out of this shell. You're playing 4 Vraska's Contempt, we're playing 4 Whirlers, and we're playing Dusk Legion Zealot, which is like a free body.
Okay.
And I think against control, you can get like a surprising, just like Dusk Legion Zealot is a nice hedge because just getting some free damage in here and there on a body that didn't cost you a card is actually really important in matchups like that. Like if you play a more dedicated anti-aggro card, I think it's trickier to win game 1 against control.
And one thing that we've kind of seen is the power of, like, there's so many more X1s in this format that Dusk Legion actually blocks a little bit better than I thought it would. I was trying out some Sultai lists with it, and I was like surprised at the number of times it actually held the ground a little bit more than I thought it would.
Yeah, and this list has a lot of 1 and 2 drops. Like when you look at 7 cycling lands, 5 1-drop removal spells, 5 2-drop removal spells, plus 4 more Dusk Legions and 4 Glint Sleeves. You really, like, when you get into 4 mana, you're very likely to be able to at least, if not double spell, double action off a Dusk Legion Zealot. Yeah. And I assume that's true in Sultai too, right? You're playing like a ton of 2-drops. So I think that like when you're playing a bunch of 1s and 2s, cards like this get better because they help you spend all your mana more consistently. Okay. I think if we're looking at this compared to like, this deck reminds me a lot of the blue-black deck, but I think you have better removal in game 1.
Can we stop for a second?
Yeah.
Oh, Mason.
Okay.
Mason, will you send me a timestamp at like 57?
Okay, so moving on from monsters.
Yeah, let's talk about Greenblatt. Yeah, let's talk about
Snake.
Greenblatt Constrictor. And obviously, I know everything there is to know about this deck, according to Mason. However, I'm just not nearly the player of the amazing Moto Grinder that we have on the deck list in front of us. Who's this Reader Rabbit?
Yeah, we have him and Paul Rietzel slumming it out just outside the top 8.
Yeah, so they played 2 cards different, right? Or something?
Yeah, I think Rietzel played a Ripjaw Raptor and Reed played a Gonti.
No. Reed sorry. So he played an extra Rishkar. Am I wrong?
No, it's just Ripjaw Raptor versus Gonti.
Okay. Yeah, okay, I see it now. Yeah, so these guys obviously played well. So let's talk really quick about what they did. So the list we have is 4 Walking Ballista, 4 Mournfolk Branchwalker, 1 Seeker Squire, 4 Winding Constrictor, 4 Jadelight Ranger, 2 Rishkar, 1 Gonti, 4 Verdurskir Hulk, 1 Vraska, 1 Blossoming Defense, 4 Fatal Push, 4 Vraska's Contempt, and then a Lifecraft Bestiary main. They have 25 lands, as well as 3 Duress, 3 Sun.
Their sideboards were a little different, sure. Right?
Well, I'm just going to read Reed's. 3 Deathcore Scavenger, 1 Golden Demise, 2 more Bestiary, 3 Brontodon, 1 Vital Force, and 2 Carnage Tyrant. So, here's the thing. I am not allowed to disagree with Reed Duke on a green-black deck. That's like against the rules of Magic. Michael, what do you think of this? What do you think of Lifecraft Bestiary in the main?
I mean, I think they're just hedging. Like, they're playing some one-ofs that are like, I mean, I would say like the Blossoming Defense, Vraska, Gonti, or Ripjaw Raptor or whatever are all kind of like flex slots.
Yep.
Right, like those can kind of be whatever. So my thought is that they're probably not playing more Blossoming Defenses just because drawing the second one is always horrible. Like, you're pretty happy to draw the first one most of the time, but you're basically always unhappy to draw the second. So I kind of agree with this as like a deck building philosophy. If you never want to draw the second one, don't play 2 and hope to draw 1. Just play 1.
Yeah, this is something that I've done for a little while that I really like in this list is I think that you do want a Blossoming Defense to keep your opponents honest. But like just playing that other one just gets so bad so quickly. I really agree and appreciate this deck building philosophy. And let's talk really quick about green-black.
So they're doing the same thing with Vraska, right? Like, sometimes the first one is good. Sometimes the first one you're dead when you cast it. But you never want to draw the second Vraska. There's no hand where you're like, oh, you know what this hand needs? It needs another 6-drop.
It's so funny. I've had 1 Vraska and 1 Blossoming Defense in like every green-black X decks I posted for Snake this entire format. Like just one of both. I think that you want one of both. And there's a few reasons. I think that Vraska is, in the matchups where Vraska is good, drawing that 1 Vraska is usually game over. Like, Tokens decks they can't kill you fast enough that when you play that Vraska, they can beat you. Like, you play it, you minus it, you plus it, you minus it. The game's over.
Well, you minus it, and they have to have cast out or whatever now.
Right, yes.
Yeah, yep.
So I think that the way they're building this deck is very streamlined, very good. And honestly, I think that we're maybe I was wrong. Because I really didn't like Branchwalker Jadelight Ranger. But the thing is I think that you can basically build the deck with random creatures once you decide that you're just on the Rishkar Verdurskir Hulk plan.
Yeah, I think that's true. I also think that, like, this deck is just built to be a lot slower and less aggressive than...
Yeah.
This deck is taking advantage of the fact that sweepers aren't very good right now.
Yep.
I don't think this deck is remotely playable if people are playing a bunch of Fumigates in there.
Oh, it's definitely not.
But you're sort of saying that I don't think you can reasonably do that. So my goal is just to present a wide board play around, settle if I can, and we're just going to play guys. So every guy in this list is generating value in some kind of way. And like one of the things about Explorer is that even if the creature is killed immediately, you're still getting something out of it. But like when you play Foul Orchard over Aether Hub, you're kind of saying like, our mana's going to be pretty good. It's going to be slow, but like 4 Vraska's Contempts, a main deck Seeker's Squire is like, we're just trying to play slow, grindy games.
Yeah,
right?
This deck is saying like, listen, I'm going to get value out of my Explore creatures. I'm going to, like, Vraska's Contempt is something that like we are priced into in this format, so I'm going to make a deck that lets me play 4.
Yes, exactly. And I think that it looks reasonable. Like, I don't think that this deck is particularly exciting. I don't know that, like...
No, it's not.
I don't know that it's worth, like, investing a ton of time into, but there are metagames where this deck makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I think that, like...
It's just like, it's really hard to look at this list and not be like, yeah, that looks fine.
Yeah, you look at this list and you see a green-black mid-range-ish good value creature deck, and there are going to be weekends where, like, the best EV play is to play a deck like this. Like, that's just going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, my guess is this deck mostly stomps mono red, can beat control.
You basically just don't want to play against Approach.
You don't want to play against Approach. I doubt you really want to play against Godpharaoh's Gift with this kind of setup. Like,
well, it kind of depends on your sideboard. I think that this sideboard, you're kind of priced into certain things. So I personally have lost to. I'm going to knock on non-existent wood here. I've never lost to Godpharaoh's Gift with these decks, and the reason for that is because, first of all, those decks are so bad against Deathcourt Scavenger post board.
Yeah, I mean, Deathcourt Scavenger is really good, but with people playing Gate specifically, they have access to a lot more removal for those in the board games.
Do.
And
once they started playing Gate, the matchup did get a lot harder. What do you think of playing only one Vraska in the 75?
I mean, I'm kind of fine with it, just mostly because I just think this deck doesn't really support 6-drops very well. Like, you can sometimes Rishkar one out, but you're only playing 25 lands. Like, It's mostly a turn 6 play, and there just aren't that many matchups where, like...
Where it matters.
Where I'm really excited. Like, Vraska's, like, it's just a pretty good Magic card, but it's not, like, really that good in this deck.
Sure.
Right? We're just trying to play our 6th land and play a Vraska, and sometimes it's good enough, which is why you're playing one. I mean, it's really powerful, but...
Let's go on to another interesting deck. We have coming in next, we have Grixis Energy, and I'm pretty sure I sent a Grixis control deck to Mason.
Oh, so we should actually... So if we want to look instead, the list that I am most interested in is by Panda Beast 24, and it was posted in this most recent batch. I'll just read it for posterity. But sure. This is Nathaniel Smith, who is a gold pro, and I generally think is just really good at Magic. So when I see his name pop up, I'm gonna look at it, and I like this.
Hold on.
So
we actually should talk about this for a second, because if we actually go by MTGO and what they're doing, there's only actually one Grixis actual energy deck on MTG Goldfish. All of the rest of them are actually, sorry, there's only one Grixis energy deck. I just clicked through like 6 of them, and they're all actually Grixis control.
So some of them are Grixis control, but it's getting combined, and then they're splitting out Grixis energy sometimes as different decks.
Interesting.
It's MTG Goldfish being weird. Okay. I think realistically, I am more into. So they're like splitting the difference, right? There are some. If you go down and find.
Oh yeah, if I go to the lower ones though, like if I click lower, all of them are Grixis energy.
Right. So what happened was they like somehow. So this happens a lot with MTG Goldfish, where they're like software that is compiling what is what, just gets confused. But regardless, I really like this list from Nathaniel Smith. It's 4 Dusk Legion Zealot, 4 Glintsleeve Siphoner, 4 Whirler Virtuoso, 2 Rekindling Phoenix, 2 Glorybringer, 3 Scarab God, 2 Chandra, 3 Fatal Push, 2 Magma Spray, and a Braid, 4 Harness Lightning, and 4 Vraska's Contempt, along with 25, pretty standard lands, including 7 cycling lands.
So what do you think, when it comes to Grixis Energy, what do you think the key cards are?
Okay, I love Dusk Legion Zealot because when I look at this deck, what I see is commitment to beating Mono Red and Hazoret out of this shell. You're playing 4 Vraska's Contempt, we're playing 4 Whirlers, and we're playing Dusk Legion Zealot, which is like a free body.
Okay.
And I think against control, you can get like a surprising, just like Dusk Legion Zealot is a nice hedge because just getting some free damage in here and there on a body that didn't cost you a card is actually really important in matchups like that. Like if you play a more dedicated anti-aggro card, I think it's trickier to win game 1 against control.
And one thing that we've kind of seen is the power of, like, there's so many more X1s in this format that Dusk Legion actually blocks a little bit better than I thought it would. I was trying out some Sultai lists with it, and I was like surprised at the number of times it actually held the ground a little bit more than I thought it would.
Yeah, and this list has a lot of 1 and 2 drops. Like when you look at 7 cycling lands, 5 1-drop removal spells, 5 2-drop removal spells, plus 4 more Dusk Legions and 4 Glint Sleeves. You really, like, when you get into 4 mana, you're very likely to be able to at least, if not double spell, double action off a Dusk Legion Zealot. Yeah. And I assume that's true in Sultai too, right? You're playing like a ton of 2-drops. So I think that like when you're playing a bunch of 1s and 2s, cards like this get better because they help you spend all your mana more consistently. Okay. I think if we're looking at this compared to like, this deck reminds me a lot of the blue-black deck, but I think you have better removal in game 1.
Can we stop for a second?
Yeah. And one of the things I like about these mid-range lists in general, I just like seeing 4 Vraska's Contempts because 4 Vraska's, we've seen this in now 3 of our 5.
It's becoming a point that like you have to do this in this format.
Well, that until control decks figure out a way to actually win games against mono red, there's no reason they can't punish you that much for playing Vraska's Contempt. And the secret is that the blue-black decks, Vraska's Contempt is actually fine against, right? They're playing like Torrential Gearhulks and Scarab God, so it's not like that card is dead in those matchups.
Let's actually talk really quickly about one of the things that people are really trying to push for, which is the 3 Vraskas, 1 hour. What do you think of that split?
Oh, they're trying to play an hour of Devastation in the main deck?
No. An hour of the black one.
Just for mana considerations, I guess?
No, I think the idea is that like it gets them sometimes with their god, because so often your Vraska's Contempts are killing Hazarets or Scarab Gods. People want to try and hedge. But I really don't like it. I think that Vraska's Contempt does like so much that I would rather just be there.
Depends on the matchups you're playing consistently. I really like the life gain from Vraska's Contempt.
Me too.
And I think it's really hard to win the mono red matchups without some ways to recoup a little bit of life here and there. And that's probably even more true if you actually start playing Dusk Legion Zealot. Because while it's a body, like the life is not totally free. But I love Vraska's Contempt. I pretty much never been that unhappy to draw Vraska's Contempt, like basically ever. And I've played that card in like a Pro Tour and 2 GPs. Yeah. So I think basically you're kind of insane to not play at least 3 Vraska's Contempts in any deck that can.
Yeah. Michael, where do we think that Grixis Energy stands right now? You can go first.
It kind of seems like it's in a little bit of a transition to me. What I like about this deck is that I think depending on the cards you actually play, you have a lot of control over how your matchups look.
Yeah.
So I like that. I like that, like, we get like the sort of duress negate sideboard that I was so into in the last format. And depending on how you build your main deck, I think you can sort of pick which matchups you care the most about. What I don't like about it is we're still playing a lot of tap lands. We're a little bit unfocused in our game 1s, I think. And really, the card Whirler Virtuoso is just not that good in this deck.
Yeah. So here's my thought. Before, it seemed like we were playing red for Harness Lightning Whirler Virtuoso. And people kind of just ported this deck over because it didn't lose anything from bannings, right? And it was still a decent deck. But after seeing the way that these blue-black mid-ranger decks are being built now compared to 3 weeks ago, I honestly don't know why we're playing red. And I would actually say that you have to give me a pretty convincing reason at this point to play Grixis Energy over blue-black midrange. And if you had asked me before we started this show, I would not have said that.
So I think if you're looking for a reason to be convinced, Whirler Virtuoso is still substantially better than Champion of Wits against Mono Red.
That's true.
Also, I think the blue-black deck actually might have worse mana than this deck.
It does.
Because you're trying to play Gifted Aetherborn. So I think it's maybe a little deceiving in that, like, you'd think like, oh, the blue-black deck is like the more conservative version, but I don't actually think that's true.
Let me actually be. I'm
not saying you're saying that. I'm just saying if we look at the lists, it kind of looks like that.
So I had a teammate who was getting back. We have a new teammate on our testing team who was trying to getting back into standard, and blue-black midrange was one of the decks he mentioned. I was like, that deck has really bad mana. I would really worry about that holding a place in the metagame. And while I think that's true, this deck has changed significantly between Chart, of course, and Liliana Death Majesty. Just what the deck is trying to achieve has significantly changed. And when I look at Grixis, one of the things that you're getting that we've already talked about is those flyers, right? Those Rekindling Phoenix, Glory Bringers, stuff like that. But I kind of just worry that I'm trying to do too many things in Grixis, and I can do something more streamlined in blue-black. Does that make sense?
For whatever it's... Yeah, I get that. For whatever it's worth, I would imagine that this deck would actually most likely beat the blue-black deck. I would imagine head-to-head that the Glory Bringers and Rekindling Phoenixes, along with Chandras, are actually incredibly problematic for the blue-black deck. Now, I don't know that like either of these decks is so popular that should be your deciding factor. It's just something I would note.
No, that's completely fair. It's just interesting because, and I'm only mentioning this because before this show started, I wouldn't have felt this way, and maybe I'm being...
But I feel you. They're sort of doing the same thing, right? Like
they are.
We're playing a lot of the same cards, and we're trying. Like if you think about what game plan you're trying to execute, it's surprisingly similar.
Well, you kind of talked about it with the game one comment that you made about this deck, right? Where like you kind of have an identity crisis game one. You get to adapt, right? Because of you're playing three colors, it's so easy for you to just say, well, this is what I want to be doing in this matchup, and then you go to do it, right? Whereas when you go to the blue-black deck, you're like, well, I guess I'm playing Deadeye Tracker on my sidebar because I don't know what else I'm going to play in that spot. Right. And then you're like, well, I guess I'm playing X or I guess I'm playing Y because like I don't know, I'm playing two colors and like it's not that big of a standard format. Like it's tough. So I just don't know where I stand on Grixis today. Whereas if you had asked me before this podcast, I would have been like, Grixis is just like a solid deck and you should try it. And that's still true. I still think Grixis is a solid deck.
I specifically like this deck. My biggest beef with this deck specifically is just that I haven't been that happy with Chandra. It's not particularly good against Mono Red. Green-Black is playing Walking Ballista. Basically every deck we've highlighted is playing like
Vraska's Contempt.
For Vraska's Contempt. So it's not really as durable as you'd think as it looks like it should be.
Yeah. Chandra's an interesting life in Standard in that she's either been like the best card in Standard or you wonder you should be playing her.
Thoroughly mediocre, right? It's like one or the other. I remember distinctly testing for Pro Tour Kaladesh, and like she had her moments
where you were like, "This is the best card I've ever played."
Super underwhelmed in general. Like,
well, yeah, that has a lot to do with Kaladesh, but like, it was so funny because like all of our decks were like Chandra, and like at first it was like I have so many options, I have so many abilities, but then as you started to attack Chandra specifically, it was really easy to attack her. It was like I can make Chandra not matter.
It kind of feels like that again to me. Like I don't know when your Whirler Virtuosos really have a lot of energy, so like when you had like Rogue Refiner and Attune, because I was basically playing, you know, we all played a ton of Temur, right? Like, it was really hard to kill sometimes, but looking at this deck, it's so hard to actually protect your Chandra. Like, and that just makes me wonder, you know, so if I'm playing it as a 4-mana removal spell that also soaks up an attack, is that even good?
I don't know, man.
And it's like sometimes a threat, but it's not really that hard to kill in any of these mid-range mirrors. And that's like, I used to love that card against green-black because they would have to trade a Walking Ballista for it and it would kill something else most of the time. And you'd be like, oh, that's fantastic. But when I look at these lists right now, I'm not that sold on Chandra being great.
Let's go to our next deck. Our number one deck, I think it was by a little bit of a margin too, is just mono red aggro. And
yeah, it's actually double. It's 15 to 7%.
Yeah, and the thing is last week on the podcast, Quinn and I were basically like, you have to give us a reason not to play this deck. It was funny because going into the PPTQ last weekend, everybody's like, what are you playing? What are you playing? What are you playing? I'm like, mono red. Like, you have to give me a reason not to play it. The reason for me not to play it is every single person I talked to was playing mono red, and I didn't want to play the mirror.
Sure. I mean, not being able to figure out like what you're supposed to do in the mirror is a real problem with this deck, I think.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. Like, you look at it and you're just kind of like, draw more Hazarets, I guess.
Yeah. And like I said, kind of early in the Always Improving part of this podcast, like, I should have snapped off. Like, I knew that Direfleet Daredevil was like a way that I could beat it, and I should have snapped it off. But I think that the fact that it seems like people have figured out that this is what we thought it would be, which is the best deck in this format right now.
It's just good. Like, you don't have to play a lot of bad cards. I think when
I don't think you have to play any bad cards.
Yeah, I mean, Bomat Courier is like pretty outrageous. Carry Zev is very good. And then On-Crop Crasher is the worst card in this deck, I think, by a lot.
Oh,
and
yeah.
On-Crop Crasher is not like a bad Magic card. But when you're looking at On-Crop Crasher and you're like, oh man, I can't believe I have to play On-Crop, like, you're spoiled. Right? Yeah. When you're like reading On-Crop Crasher and you're like, oh, On-Crop Crasher.
I mean, if we just look at some of the other decks that we've talked about, right? Like, Grixis Energy kind of has to play some clunkers, like, just to get you where you want to go.
Like, is Glorybringer even good in that deck?
But what else are you gonna do? And the thing about mono red
the
is
green black deck is playing a Seeker Squire. Right?
Yeah.
Like, if On-Crop Crasher is your worst card and you get to play like two pretty broken. Okay, so this is a deck that Chandra's actually good in. Because you plus it and then your opponent has to attack you.
That was actually what I was going to say is, we were kind of dogging on Chandra in a couple of decks, but in this deck, you're like, okay, plus it, do you too. Then they have to attack you. I mean, and then if there was a chance of them blocking before you played the Chandra,
oh yeah, it's just not happening.
It just went out the window. Like what are they going to do? They're just going to let you keep Chandra in play?
Right. Let alone if you have like a Shock or an Abrade or a Lightning Strike. I mean, the other thing is burn in this format is really good, and you get to play all of it in this deck.
Plussing to make mana and then killing a creature while you plussed her is like, it's so unfair.
I mean, the outrageous thing is in mono red, you almost never even have to do that. You can almost always plus for damage
too, and then they have to attack back. They often still can't kill her.
Yeah, that's what I would say. Like, so much of the time I've had this card in play in this deck, you plus it into a board of creatures, attack them with all your stuff. They can't really block. Now they have to attack back, and they still can't kill it. You untap like Lightning Strike and replus, and they're just dead.
I had a draw on Moto the other day where I played Chandra, plussed it for mana, put an Earthshaker counter into play, made it so their dude couldn't block, attacked them with everything, and then they only had like 4 power in play for the crackback, or else they would die. And the guy messaged me on Moto. He's like, this is so unfair. And I was like, I don't know what to tell you. Like,
yeah, seems good.
Like,
yeah. No, I mean, I think this is like the deck where Chandra is very good. And Hazoret is just a stupid Magic card. Like, Hazoret is always good. If you were playing a deck where Hazoret is at the top of your curve, some percentage of your draws you will just win for basically no reason.
And last week on the show, Quinn and I kind of talked about, I kind of want to play more one drops to maximize my Hazarets because that's how you're going to win in this format. And I think that to kind of speak to what Michael was saying is like when your deck is the question and we're not quite sure about the answer. So we just spent most of this part of the show talking about we love Vraska's Contempt, we love Vraska's Contempt, we love Vraska's Contempt. And like the thing is this deck says you have to love Vraska's Contempt. Otherwise you don't get to play.
It's not even you have to love it, it's you have to draw it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where it gets tough, right? Like, you need one, and you need one for every Hazoret I draw, or you probably can't win. One of the things that I actually love about this deck is that you can mulligan really aggressively with it, where, like, normally you'd be like, oh, I don't have, like, a lot of
reach. It makes your Hazoret so good.
But actually, if you, like, mold a 5 and your hand is, like, 1-drop 3 lands, or, like, 1-drop 2 lands, a Braid Hazoret, and you just, like, find 2 lands by turn 4, your opponent is so dead. Like if they don't have exactly Vraska's Contempt, they can never win that game. And it feels really stupid when you realize that like this is the deck where sometimes you mulligan and you're like, oh man, this hand is actually better than any 7 I could have had because it's going to like I'm on the draw, but I'm going to be able to turn 4 Hazoret and attack with it. Like Hazoret is a messed up Magic card, and it's really hard after you play it for a little while to be like, oh, I think I should play something else.
Yeah. I mean, early on, like when these decks were coming out, I was all about like 3 Hazoret. I was like, I don't see a reason to play 4, blah, 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 blah. And then I started playing with the deck. I'm like, I'm so dumb. Like, yeah, I don't want to draw anything else. And
I played 3 before. It's just stupid.
We were just wrong, Michael. We were just wrong.
I mean, the Moto lists before Pro Tour Hour were playing 2. And, kept saying, oh, I like my mono red matchup's good as long as I don't draw Hazoret. And then we kept adding more Hazorets into the deck. And it was like, wait, do we have any bad matchups? Right? I mean, what do you not want to play? Like, I think we ended up only playing 3, which was clearly a mistake, but it still was way better than 2. And I think I basically only played mirrors at that Pro Tour and mostly lost because I didn't draw as many Hazorets.
Michael, what would we play in Standard at a Grand Prix tomorrow and why?
Okay, so as much as I just talked about how I love Hazoret, I also think that Mono Red is a pretty high variance deck and not one that gives you a lot of room to outplay your opponent. I think it's very demanding of you to play well to win most of the time, but I would lean toward the blue-black mid-range deck. That looks like the kind of deck I can win with. I understand how to play games with that deck.
Yeah, so if you had asked me last week, I would have said you'd be crazy not to play Mono Red. Like, you have to give me a reason. Like I said, you have to give me a reason not to play it.
So one stipulation.
Yes.
There are 2 4-drops that I'm playing 4 of one of them. I'm playing either 4 Hazoret or I'm playing 4 Vraska's Contempt, and you are wrong if you're not playing one of those 2.
I think that you are absolutely correct. And, well, hold on. I do like Chris's deck that I did a deck on too.
It's got to be close. Like, okay, so I guess Rekindling Phoenix would maybe be the other one because Rekindling Phoenix like blocks Hazard. Like, yeah. But I think again, unless you have like a real reason, it's very close to you have you have
to be playing some kind of very specific 4-drop. I agree with that. I also agree that before this episode, I would have said I'm snapping off that red deck. I need to try this blue black deck, dude. Like it everything that it's doing makes sense to me. Like on and when you look at a deck and on paper you're like, I get this. That's a good thing. Sometimes people are like that's too simple. It's too easy, but it's like, well, it also just is correct. Like it just makes sense.
There's no sense to like. So I get not wanting to play like all the same decks all the time, but at the same time, I've had a lot of success playing like grindy mid-range decks that eventually slam Scarab God. Like sure. if that's the plan we're going for, I like my chances.
Yeah, hold on. Also, you've never gotten to be like, I like grindy mid-range decks that get to play Scarab God that also get to play Charter Course profitably. Like that's
I really like the card Charter Course. I really like Fatal Push. I really like Vraska's Contempt. Like we're just getting to play a lot of cards. I love Glint Sleeve Siphoner. Man, I've been on Glint Sleeve Siphoner train for Probably too long.
Shut up. You literally tested nothing but Glint Sleeve Siphoner decks for that Pro Tour.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got you off of Glint Sleeve Siphoner for that Pro Tour.
Well, I think Walking Ballista became a thing that existed, and, it was harder to justify. But I do love Glint Sleeve Siphoner, so, like, there's something to be said for playing cards you like if you think they're also good.
Yes.
And I think that when I look at like my comfort level with mono red, I'm not sure that I'm quite there on the small decision making parts of the deck.
It's so hard. People think that those kind of decks are so easy to play, but like all honesty, in my experience, it like a mistake in a deck with like this, like mono red, has just always been so punishing to me. Not that like playing a land incorrectly in a mid range deck doesn't do a similar thing. And I think that so many people are like, well, all your lands come into play untapped, so like you're removing part of the game. But it's just a different part of the game that mono red becomes hard with.
And the mulligan decisions and the sideboarding, it's extremely difficult. And although you're going to win some games basically on the back of Hazoret being broken, because it is, like the card is just really broken. People also like, no one's like, oh, Hazoret, what a surprise. Right? Like, you're going to win games because Hazoret is broken, but you're also going to play against, 15 opponents who, like, have read the card Hazoret before, right? You're not going to play against anyone where they're not going to make tactical mistakes against mono red. Yeah. Like, they might make sequencing mistakes, but they're not going to, like, assign their role incorrect. Like, it's harder to leverage skill advantage with a deck that pretty much always has to be the aggressor, in my opinion. That's, for me, that is what I found.
So we're both on blue-black, and the reason is Scarab God, Charter Course for Essence Contempt.
It just looks like a good time. Give me a week, and I'll probably have a bunch of beef with it. But
don't worry, you'd have to give both of us less than a week. Michael's over-exaggerating. We'll both play 3 leagues with this deck and have an opinion.
And Michael then not like it.
Michael will play 1 league, start another league with it, and then have an opinion by match 2.
So I think that one of the things that is true is that, like, and I find this is a trap for me. I'm sure it's a trap for a lot of people, but it's really easy to be unhappy with things you're really familiar with, but you just kind of have like grass is always greener syndrome, right? Where like basically when you know a deck's strengths and weaknesses fully, and then you play something else on a small sample size, you just haven't actually played enough to learn when it's bad.
Oh, this happens all the time. And the other thing that happens is once you find a deck's weakness, we could probably do a whole training grounds on this. Where like you're like, oh, well, this deck is bad at this, so I'm going back to my comfort thing for a hot minute, which is probably incorrect, right? Where you're like, well, I already know this thing, so I'm going to go here for a second, even though it might still not be great. Like,
well, I think the main thing is just that like figuring out that a deck loses to something is not exactly shocking, right?
Like, right. Otherwise, we'd have a dumb format.
What's the point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't remember any time where I've found a deck that I was like, this can't lose to anything. Yeah. Because anytime that's your thought, your sample's just too small.
Yeah. And if we ever do find a deck that can't lose to anything, you can probably find it by becoming a patron. You go to patreon.com/ccmtg, become a patron of $5 or more, and get access to any of those decks that we do find, if we ever find one. You can find us directly. You can find me at Spencer13H on Twitter. You can find Michael at MagicMikeMTG, best Twitter handle on the web. You can find Mason at Mason E. Clark, if I'm not mistaken. And you can find the podcast at CCMTG. Please like us on Facebook. Join the Facebook Constructive Criticism family. And if you're a patron, please join the Constructive Critics group at $5 or more. You can join the conversation on Discord, which has been way more active lately. Like, straight up, the Discord is now matching the Facebook group. So please join the Discord. We're getting active in basically everywhere. I'm really proud of what's happening, so check that out. You can find the link for the Discord and the Constructive Criticism family on the BIOS page and the info page on constructivecriticism.com. You can join the clan by messaging me at Spencer13H or Quentin at Earthstrip, that's URTHSTRYPE. And you can tweet us with hashtag Would That Be Good. Hashtag Would That Be Good is our Twitter outreach program. If you tweet it, Mason will read it. Mason, why don't you go ahead and read the first one for us?
God, I wish we had... now I got my mic. I wish we had talked about and this is just a good way for me to vamp while I pull out my iPhone. I wish we had talked about this becoming a regular thing, because now I'm just like, I'm on edge. Like, are you going to ask me or not? And I'm trying to get my phone to load, but the Twitter won't load, so I have to keep talking about something that's not 100% true, but is true. You know what I mean?
Well, you'll have to find out next week if it's a regular thing, Mason.
God, yep. Well, you know what? I think the first one's me, from the looks of it. Afraid of Monday's unbanning? Pick up your foil copies of Jace's Defeat before the GOAT gets unbanned. Go to Oasis Games and use the code CCMTG to get... Oh, I used the wrong code. But whatever, get store credit back. Hashtag would that be good. And it's a picture of Jace's Defeat. Because I knew they were going to unban Jace, right? Obvi. And then, yeah.
Wait, where is this? I don't see this one.
I don't know either.
It's on the top ones for me. Do you guys not... Oh, because you have me blocked on Twitter,
latest.
probably.
No, I used latest.
You
Did you use latest?
Whoa, I used top. No.
Because otherwise you don't know what
Because I was looking at the
tweet to read
dates.
because they're like.
Oh no!
All right.
Why did you do this to me?
Well, Mason.
I had to scroll now.
Well, Mason looks
Why
at
is
that.
so hard?
Hang on, wait! I found it. Jared Poole. Jared Poole tweets just Pooley. I don't know how you say your name, Jared. I'm sorry. Just finished off a good bit of testing with Adrian for Standard. Was a great and helpful experience in the quest of hashtag always improving. And now I'm going to go to sleep and with his sweet sultry voice stuck in my head. Haha. Hashtag would that be good?
Dude, Adrian's voice is definitely sweetened. It is a good voice. Like Adrian has. I don't know that it's radio voice. Like it's like Morgan Freeman voice, so it's like way too good for radio. Adrian should definitely be a voice actor. I would say that Adrian's in anime,
yeah.
probably more than like video games. If you think about Morgan Freeman, like his best work is definitely always just being the voice over a film. So like being the narrator for films, Adrian could definitely do that. After 4 months of doing renovations, my house is finally ready to sell. Grateful for being able to go back to grinding Magic in my free time. Hashtag finally. Hashtag would that be good? Yeah.
Congratulations. That's sweet. It's fun to get to spend your time actually doing stuff you want to do.
Yeah, renovating houses is like so much work. So I'm sure that was rough for you, Matthew, and I'm glad that you get to move on from that.
All right, Ben Vasco tweets.
Nope.
What? Oh, I found it.
Adam's-
Oh, yeah. No, you read it. I failed. I failed Adam, and I failed my country.
Adam Spain says, starting up a podcast of my own with an emphasis on theory, deck building practices, and focus on local community. Hashtag would that be good. Adam, if there is one piece of advice that I can give you for podcasting, one piece is do not focus on your local community. And the reason for that is you should dream bigger, man. Like, dream bigger. You can highlight members of your local community, but don't make the podcast about your local community because, when you're 200 episodes in, you always want to give yourself a chance to grow and improve. I don't know, but also do what you love, so you can ignore everything I just said.
Good tip. Man, that was just like really experience shining through.
I'm being honest. Like, I wouldn't do that, but also, if you're gonna spend as much time as I spend on the podcast, you should do whatever the heck you want.
Yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, like, you probably just figure out pretty quickly what works for you and doesn't, right?
Yeah. Like having Michael's really rough, but you have
to put up with me. I get it.
Yep.
What's the next one?
All right, now Ben Vasco tweeted, going to be heading to GP Memphis with @CarryD92 and First F&M. Get hyped. Hashtag would that be good? That
Those
would
are
be
literally two of your teammates, and you couldn't even say their Twitter names.
First F&M is 100% correctly said, and the other guy, Brian, I had to look to make sure that was him before I said anything. Vamp, I'm sorry that I don't know how to say your name, but I can say Brian. Hopefully, I'll get to talk to them.
It's Carry DS92.
Yeah, that's. You know what? I got a story, and we're gonna move on to this. It's about Brian and Jake. So I'm at GP Indy with Danny and my friend Trey, and we finished round 1, and we stand up and was like, all right, I gotta go find Jake Tilk. I gotta talk to this guy. And like I turn around, and Jake's like, "Hi, nice to meet you." And he was right behind me playing his match, and got up and leaned over his match table to shake my hand. It was awesome. And then I didn't see him for the rest of the weekend. He disappeared. I looked for him later, couldn't find him. But
it was just too good an introduction. Like, didn't want to spoil it. I get that.
Yeah,
like
that's just too good.
You got to know when to quote in your head.
Exactly.
Finally got into the MTG Arena. Super stoked to see what it has to offer. We got hashtag closed beta. I'm in the closed beta. I'm not allowed to talk about it, so I'm glad you got
NBA.
it. Hashtag NBA.
I think I'm in, but I don't think I've opened it. So
fascinating.
You know.
Jared Poole says, won my first match of this PPTQ. I will play Red versus Blue Eye Cycling. Here's to keeping the streak alive. Hashtag be good. Hashtag aiming to win my first PPTQ. Then he says, so I went 4-2 and lost my win in, but I'm happy I put myself in this position to lose a win in. Got to get more of those small edges.
It's a good attitude.
This is what Michael and I preach. So Jared, you are headed in the right direction. Scotty
can't lose a win in if it's not available to you.
Exactly.
Right?
Yep. Scotty is one of my favorites, so why don't you go ahead and read this one, Mason?
I'm going to read it because I was already starting to. Because I didn't realize you were going to say Mason at the end of that. Sometimes I have faith in humanity that human intelligence will lead to a better future for all. Sometimes I see things like this and realize I was a fool, so much of a fool. Hashtag would that be good?
So hold on, I gotta read these. So Aaron Forsyth tweeted some cards from M15 that didn't make it. The first one is 1 in a black for Illegal Digging. Illegal Digging is an instant that you can pay X life, put the top X cards of your library into your graveyard, and draw a card. What?
I mean, I assume that they tested it at like various different mana costs and then just realized they couldn't print it at a mana cost where it was like it was either stupid or completely unplayable.
It was like, it probably started at 1 black.
Oh yeah, it was just Cantrip and Tomb, and then they were like, "Nah, we probably can't print Cantrip and Tomb." And then they were like, "Maybe 2," and then they were like, "No, Cantrip and Tomb is still broken at 2."
Yeah.
And then they were like 3, and then no one would play it. Yeah.
Yeah. No. It was black. People still played it at black. And they were like, "Okay, we can't actually print this."
I mean, I think at 3 that card would be fine. Like, it
do
just
you, Michael?
I do.
All right.
And then Midnight Intervention. Midnight Intervention is hilarious. Like, I don't even know how the text of this got onto a card. Because, like, Illegal Digging, like, you have to think for, like...
It sounds like a card. Like, you have to get beaten by... You have to get... Like, sometimes you have to lose to something a few times, like, and lose to it
You're talking
consecutively.
About Midnight Intervention?
No. Illegal Digging seems like the kind of card where, like, someone had an idea for it, and, like, the idea was cool, but then in practice, like, it was just people playing Dredge and Reanimator, and, like, they were like, oh, this isn't fun.
Yeah.
Midnight Intervention just looks unfun.
Yeah. So it's black X with Convoke. Target player discards X card. What is happening?
Okay, you're just like gonna play a sideboard game as control and get mind twisted on like turn 3. You're like,
so your opponent goes 2-drop, 3-drop. You discard your hand. What?
Well, I mean, you're gonna be playing a sideboard game, and your opponent, like where they would normally have to rest, now they have this. They just go like 1-drop, 1-drop. Convoke. You discard 5 cards, and you're like, where did I go wrong?
Oh my gosh, this is too fun. So I don't know about like questioning humanity here, but the next one is from.
I mean, to be fair, Aaron Forsyth says some of the dumber cards we tested early. So like, my guess is that most of the time, people have ideas for cards, and then sometimes they just like don't work, and you say, okay, this doesn't work, and you cut it.
Yeah.
And he thought, I appreciate them sharing. It's fun to see. It's fun to see the ideas, regardless.
Yeah. So Andrew posted this on Facebook. And I'm not going to say that you're stupid for getting this wrong, but come on. So he says, do zombies breathe? #. Duh. So they don't have to breathe, but obviously they can breathe.
What's the benefit of breathing if you don't have to?
They literally you cannot make noise without air passing through that part of your.
That's not true. You can't make guttural noise. You can make like.
I want you to make a noise with your mouth that.
I mean, I never said with my mouth.
Yeah, Michael's not a zombie though.
I was just like gonna flap my zombie arms, and you just see the the blood and the.
You're being ridiculous.
No. Okay, all right.
The answer to this is clearly yes, they can breathe. No, they don't have to breathe.
God, that's such good value. You can breathe, but it's not really necessary. Like, it means that zombies are really scary because they can just like walk on the floor of the ocean or whatever. just like walk.
Yeah, I think that's in a movie. Like that exact scene. I've seen that before.
It sounds scary.
Yeah.
I'm not
Peter
into
also
it.
says, is Bantu's Last Reckoning good in blue-black control? Is 4 disallows or sensors too many? Why is Doomfall in my sideboard? Hell if I know, right? RTM, what does that mean?
Right this minute.
Okay, so Andrew asked me for a list. So I sent him a picture of Mason's list, and he says, your list is the same 75 as Mason's. I was like, that's Mason's list. And then I sent him my list, which I think is 4 cards different than Mason's list.
Yeah, drastically different.
Just so you know, Mason and I literally worked on this deck together.
Oh
So,
my gosh.
So there's a reason.
Yeah.
It would be a sweet coincidence though. Like you just like, you ask LSV for a list and he like ships you one and you're like, oh man, this is the same thing I was playing on Moto last night.
Yeah. That's pretty funny. You're gonna skip over my sweet promotion for Oasis Games and the fact Mind Sculptor got unbanned. I worked so hard to get this on the show.
I don't see it.
Right there. You guys really don't see this?
No.
All right, I'm reading it again for prosperity's sake. All right, basically, I wanted to say play Jace's Defeat as a meme because Mind Sculptor's not any good because we have Jace's Defeat now. It beats Mind Sculptor. It's on the card. That's who you're supposed to laugh.
Maybe real Mason. I don't think your tweet shows up.
Yeah, whatever it is.
Fake news, screenshotting it, and this is on next week's hashtag. Would that be good?
Right. You can just tweet that with hashtag. Would that be good?
You didn't.
All right.
Yeah, you didn't add hashtag. Would that be good?
I
literally
did.
looking at the tweet on here.
No. I had 2 tweets about it because I did one before the banning and then I did one after the banning.
Mason allegedly doesn't know what a cinnamon bear is. Dude is either a liar or the biggest troll. Chantel responds, "Is that like a super tan burly dude?" Question mark.
You said so many.
I responded, "Hashtag really good." So first of all, this made me fall out of my seat laughing. Chantel's response. It was the actual funniest thing that I made.
That's what I came into, and Mason and I both didn't understand. But seeing Chantel's tweet, that's actually really funny.
Like lost it. Just applause. Thank you, Chantel.
All right.
Second of all, apparently, Michael, a lot of people don't know what a cinnamon bear is.
So Casey commented on Facebook saying that's a Utah thing.
Well, it's definitely not. So the old podcast, I'm calling it Heavy Meta, when they were describing Fireball, the beverage, which is actually what I was describing to Mason when I was talking about cinnamon bears, they also were like talking about cinnamon bears when they were describing Fireball. And I've talked to Todd Anderson, who is like a Fireball aficionado. He also describes it as a cinnamon bear. So I just, there has to be part of the country that doesn't have them, and parts that do.
Yeah, so maybe it's like a regional thing.
This is like way too much thought going into cinnamon bears, which are thoroughly mediocre anyways.
Well, the thing is why it's so funny is I was explaining to Mason how terrible cinnamon bears are.
Now we've spent entirely too long telling him about something he probably shouldn't want to try.
30 minutes.
So, like, if you could find them, don't try them, but also they exist.
Well, now I have to try them.
When you come to Salt Lake, we will record a video of you trying cinnamon bears.
And you'll be like, this is like the worst hot tamale ever.
Yeah. So you guys skipped a tweet. So we have to go with this tweet. Josh Collier tweeted, peanut butter on cheeseburgers.
I don't have this one either.
Oh, yeah, I'm into that.
You want peanut butter on your cheeseburger?
I've done that before.
I don't have these tweets.
No, I heard.
I can see that tweet. Yeah, I can see that tweet.
Spencer's fake news over here.
But yeah, I like that. Maybe I'm weird. I don't know. I think it's pretty good.
What is happening? Well, to be fair, we already know my Twitter's broken. But this is actually something that Shake Shack does. They actually have a special peanut butter sauce that you can have on your burger. It's a special burger, and it's like their best-selling burger by a lot.
Yeah, it's good.
Really?
Yeah. Have you had it?
No, I've never been to Shake Shack.
Okay, well, when
you
we go to
and a lot of places that just have like a lot of burgers have some burger with peanut butter. I mean, I wouldn't say like the majority of burgers I eat have peanut butter. Or like, it's not like that. But like I've had it before. It's good.
The sauce at Shake Shack is not peanut butter. It's a different sauce. But we'll try it when we go to GP Vegas, Mason.
Yeah,
All right. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I'm sorry about hashtag What the Good. Sorry about this podcast because it's been an interesting one. So we'll see you guys all next week, and thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, Jace the Mind Sculptor next week. Card of the week. Goodbye.